Picture this. You're at Trump International Golf Course, just a regular day on the green, and suddenly gunshots.
It's the kind of scenario you hear about, and it sends chills down your spine, right?
Mhm.
And in this case, the target was former President Donald Trump. We're trying to make sense of it all today, unpacking this attempted assassination.
Yeah, and to be clear, this wasn't just someone shouting threats from a distance. This was serious. We're talking an AK-47 style rifle. Ruth was reportedly as close as 300 to 500 yards from Trump.
That's close enough to be incredibly unnerving, right?
Yeah.
Especially for the Secret Service. They don't draw their weapons lightly. It's a rare occurrence, and it really underscores the severity of the threat they perceived.
Absolutely. So let's talk about the man at the center of this whole thing, Ryan Wesley Routh. At first glance, he's a 58-year-old businessman, owns a shed-building company in Hawaii Campbox, Honolulu. Originally from North Carolina, graduated from North Carolina A&T State University. Doesn't exactly scream would-be assassin, does it?
You've hit the nail on the head. That's what makes this case so fascinating. On the surface, you wouldn't necessarily connect those dots, which leads to a crucial question. What would drive someone with this kind of background to even consider such a thing?
Right. It makes you wonder what's going on beneath the surface. And here's where things take a turn. Ruth has a history, a past that's not exactly spotless. We're talking decades of run-ins with the law, hit-and-run charges, resisting arrest, even a concealed weapons violation.
A history like that definitely raises red flags. It suggests a pattern of disregard for the law. And when you consider the incident we're discussing, it takes on a whole new level of seriousness.
It's like we're seeing two completely different sides of the same person. And hold on, because it gets even more complex. Back in 2002, Ruth faced charges for possession of a weapon of mass destruction. This wasn't just some minor infraction.
You're absolutely right. That detail adds a whole new layer of complexity to this situation. Was this attempted assassination a spur-of-the-moment decision driven by some sudden surge of anger? Or does this point to something more calculated, a pattern of escalating behavior? These are the questions investigators will be grappling with, I'm sure.
And if you think that's wild, his online activity adds a whole other layer to this story. He was active on X, formerly Twitter. And get this, he voted Democrat in the 2024 primary.
Now, that does complicate the picture a bit. We're talking about a potential attack on a former Republican president, and the suspect is a Democrat. There's got to be more to the story.
Oh, there's more, all right. It turns out Ruth was pretty vocal about his dislike for Trump online. Even called him a disappointment at one point. And here's the kicker. He even mentioned that July 13th assassination attempt on Trump. Makes you wonder if this was building up for a while.
It really makes you question the motives here, right? Was this politically motivated, driven by some personal grudge, or a dangerous combination of both? That's what investigators will be trying to figure out.
And just when you thought it couldn't get any weirder, right? His online activity wasn't all just political rants. He also talked a lot about Ukraine. Seemed to really care about what was happening over there.
Okay, now that's interesting. We've got this seemingly contradictory information about his political leanings and who he allegedly targeted, and now you're saying there's this whole Ukraine connection. Tell me more.
So strap in, because this is where things take a turn. Back in 2022, Ruth actually went to Ukraine. He was dead set on joining the fight against the Russians. Even said something like, "I'm coming to Ukraine from Hawaii to fight for your kids and families and democracy. I will come and die for you."
Wow, talk about a change of pace. Goes from building sheds in Hawaii to putting his life on the line in Eastern Europe.
Oh.
There's a story there for sure.
Oh, yeah, there's a story, all right. But it didn't quite go as planned. He went over there with all the right intentions. But it turned out his age and lack of military experience meant he wasn't really cut out for the front lines.
That makes sense. I imagine they had a lot of volunteers, but needed people who were truly ready for that kind of intensity.
Exactly. But even though he couldn't fight directly, he didn't lose his passion for the cause. He kept advocating for Ukraine online, urging others to join the fight. It's like this whole experience really awakened something in him.
It's fascinating how certain life events can have such a profound impact on someone's worldview.
And you know how we mentioned CBS News was looking into this whole thing? Well, it turns out their senior foreign correspondent, Holly Williams, had actually spoken to Ruth before.
Wait, really? So there's a direct link to someone who's been covering the war in Ukraine?
Yeah. Apparently, Williams had been in contact with him for over a year, even before he went to Ukraine. He'd given her contact info for these foreign fighters. She even said he seemed sincere about supporting the cause.
It's like everything keeps pointing back to Ukraine. Makes you think, did something happen over there? Or maybe something about how the U.S. handled the situation. We know he wasn't a fan of Trump, but Could something have happened to push him over the edge?
That's the big question, isn't it? And we have to keep in mind, this investigation is just getting started. Authorities haven't figured out a motive yet. There are still a lot more questions than answers.
That's what makes this case so intriguing, right? It's like, we've got this puzzle, but we can only see a tiny part of the picture. We've got glimpses into his past, his political views, his connection to Ukraine. But those missing pieces, the ones that would help us understand the whole story, those are still out there.
And without the whole picture, it's almost impossible to answer the big question. Why? Why try to assassinate a former president? It feels like we've got all these threads, but where do you even begin to untangle something this complicated?
I'm sure investigators are going to be looking at every aspect of his life. His online activity is going to be key. Were there any red flags? Any changes in his behavior, websites or forums he visited, anything that might give us a clue? Then there's his personal life, finances, recent travels, relationships. It's painstaking work, putting together a puzzle when you're not even sure you have all the pieces.
It's a massive undertaking, for sure. This isn't some everyday case. But there's something else we need to consider. Even if we uncover a motive, how do we even process something as serious as an attempted assassination? It doesn't matter if it's about Ukraine political beliefs or something else altogether. It's a chilling reminder of just how unpredictable things are.
You're right. It's easy to see something like this and think it's an isolated incident. But I think there's more to it than that. There's a whole context, a history of events that build up to these moments. And if we can understand those factors, maybe we can stop them from happening again.
It's a lot to think about. This deep dive started with an attempted assassination on a golf course, but it's become something much bigger. It makes you think about society as a whole, the challenges we're facing right now.
And isn't that the point of a deep dive? You never know where it'll take you. It's those twists and turns, those tough questions that make it worthwhile.
Couldn't agree more. So as we wrap up today, keep this unsettling story in mind. Keep asking questions. Keep trying to understand. And never forget how powerful a good conversation can be. Until next time, keep diving deep.